Hello and welcome to Talking Home Renovations with a House Maven. I am your host, Catherine McPhail. I am an architect practicing in Eastern Massachusetts, and my specialty is additions and renovations to existing homes. This show is meant to take the stress out of home renovations for homeowners as they learn what others have done and how it went for them. Over the first 2 seasons, we have built up a library of information about elements of a home renovation, advice from contractors, architects, and other experts, as well as renovation stories from homeowners around the country. In this season, the 3rd season, we'll be investigating sustainability and building science a little bit more. And to kick that off, we have an episode with Emily Mottram, who is a high-performance architect from Maine. In this episode, she talks about the renovation she's undertaken at her own house, in which she terms a pretty good renovation. That's in reference to the Pretty Good House movement that she's a part of, and for more information about that, you can visit prettygoodhouse.org. She talks about best practices and a bit about her podcast E3, Energy and Efficiency with Emily, and the show BS and Beer. So here's my conversation with Emily. Emily, thank you for being here.
You're welcome.
For joining me. And I love your podcast, and it's so inspiring to me. And so I understand you're doing your own project right now.
Yes.
I haven't heard a thing about it, so I'm looking forward to hearing about it. What do you have to share?
Well, so I think the important thing to share is people always say like, oh, I want to go to the architect's house or the builder's house. But oftentimes that's where we trial everything so that we make sure it works on our clients' houses. And so the cobbler has no shoes is sort of like the architect has 15 unfinished projects right now. So that's about how my renovation worked. So as a high performance architect and trying to, improve with climate change and everything like that, renovations are a great place to start. So my husband and I actually bought an existing house in 2018 that was built in 1977. And we knew being on the water that there were some things that were at the end of their usable life. We had a boiler that was installed in the 90s. It's only supposed to last 15 years or so, right? It was at the end of its life. And hot water was off the boiler, which is like the worst thing that you can do with fuel oil anyway, as moving towards having a super insulated, full electric house here. But scope creep is a real thing. And every time you touch something, and this is really important for homeowners, is in renovation work, you tend to touch more things than you think you do. So every time you remove a wall, that means you're working in the room that you're in and the room that you weren't in. So, and then that continues throughout. And so the project started, we couldn't travel much this year, so we just decided to use some of our vacation time to try to crank out some projects that needed to happen before other bigger projects needed to happen. And one of them was our house had an old gas fireplace that was not connected anymore. And it had a wood stove from 1977. And part of the stuff that I learn and just keep learning more and more about as building science improves is indoor air quality and everything else. And so this old wood stove from 1977 seemed like a bad choice. It was in our kitchen. So none of that heat was really translating to our living room, which is where we hung out. And I thought, now's the time to kind of change this out. So we got a 0 clearance wood fireplace insert that looks more like a fireplace, but meets all of the EPA 2021 emissions guidelines. It has fresh air directly to it. It doesn't draw air from inside of our house. And we were just going to replace the gas fireplace with this new insert and get rid of the wood stove on the kitchen side of our house. But one project led to taking down the whole block that was in there. So there were bricks on the backside where the wood stove was. And then there was like a concrete mantle on the gas fireplace on the living room side. And as we started taking things apart, more things needed to come apart. And all of a sudden I had an open concept between my living room and my kitchen. And I went, somebody convinced me to put this back because I don't want to now.
No.
And In fairness, we have trusses, so none of that was supporting anything. When we tore it all out, we actually found cut trusses and cut floor joists. So we were
Yeah.
able to structurally repair those, which was great. So we fixed those and decided to put the fireplace on the other side. So we actually just rearranged our living room 180 degrees and we built a half wall in between so that the couch could back up to the half wall, but it's open to my kitchen and living room. But that led to patching the holes in the ceiling. It led to fixing structural repairs. It led to building out an entire box for the new wood stove that we had already purchased. So we now own. So it needed to go somewhere. And this is Maine. So we do lose power. So we kind of wanted to have that extra backup as part of it. So we started working on that and recreating a built-in that was part of the big fireplace block. But now we don't have any flooring where the fireplace block was. So this is where I say the cobbler has shoes. My infinite plan was actually I rolled a rug out over top of the area that doesn't have any flooring, and we're sort of living with that currently. Because when we pulled that up, we realized we had some particle board subfloor, which is not great. Can't put wood flooring over top of it. So we have a pile of wood flooring to put down, but we need to put subfloor down. But in order to do that, we actually have to take out our baseboards that were attached to the oil boiler. So we had to take the oil boiler out. So we had to put in heat pumps. So currently this project is in the middle of the phase where we just had heat pumps installed 2 weeks ago. So now we can take the heating system out. We actually are having fresh air ventilation also put in at the same time. The company does the same thing. So in September, they're coming to put in fresh air ventilation, which is awesome. And then we'll be able to take out the baseboards and put in the flooring. So what started as a fireplace swap out turned into a whole systems project. But all that followed along with the main goal for what we want to do, the oil boiler chimney goes through the south roof slope where I want to put solar panels in the future. So we knew that needed to come out. We knew it was going to come out, and it just came out sooner than we expected. So I just want to forewarn anybody who's doing a renovation, it snowballs really quickly. And it doesn't matter if you're the architect. In fact, I should take my own advice and know better, because if I was doing this with a client, I would have sat down with them. We probably would have come up with the open concept plan long before demo day. We would have worked through all the ideas. Like, now's your opportunity to do X, Y, or Z. What do you see the long term? Because I didn't do that. I mean, I had drawings, I had things that I was going to use with our contractor who was here helping us, but that scope creep is a real thing. And you have to remember that when you touch one thing, you touch every surface that it touches also. So that's that's the rundown on what's going on at my house. And so it's partway finished.
Is your husband an architect?
My husband is not. He works in the building trades field. He is trained as a mechanical engineer. So he was less excited about the plan changing every day for the creative that I am. Oh, we could do this. This is great. Our contractor is actually a friend of ours, and he was brilliant. He was like, whatever we decide tonight won't be the plan at breakfast. Whatever we decide at breakfast, that's what we're going to do that day. And so he rolled with it. My engineer husband was like, why does the plan keep changing? And he has graciously allowed me to start working on all these projects. And I mean, he loves the end result of a lot of the things that we've done. He gets to have his input and things that he wants to put in as well, but maybe wasn't as excited about living in a construction project for now going on 4 months. We started this in March.
Yeah, it's amazing how long it takes. And you're right, how you touch one thing and then you can't do this other thing until you do this, but you can't do that until you do this. And I'm kind of living through that right now in a really seemingly simple kitchen. It wasn't even a renovation. We just were basically redoing the floor and getting a new stove. And that has turned into so many other things. In our case, our stove has been in the hall for about 5 weeks, and our kids just say, like, that's where the stove's going to be now. We'll never have one that works, but we have it in the hall. So,
Yeah. We currently have two refrigerators because our refrigerator died. And so we have the one that we unloaded and the new one that went in. And so the other one is living in the middle of the kitchen right now so that it can get outside
yep.
for sure.
Yeah.
And the things that we would tell our client, like move out if you're going to do a major renovation like this. I did not cover enough things while we were sanding sheetrock dust, and sheetrock dust will be in everything I own for the rest of my life. So if you're not moving out and you're touching anything that has sheetrock on it, cover anything you don't want to dust.
Yep, that's a very good one. I had
Yeah.
a carpenter who convinced me it was okay to use his saws and everything down in my basement because it's an unfinished basement. Except for that, he didn't do anything to cover anything. There was sawdust for years, for about 8 years. There's been and it's not safe. That is not safe. It was crazy. But I feel like maybe we think we can handle it because we're architects. Somehow that makes us, somehow being architects makes it, I don't know what, like magically okay. Like we can live through things that other people can't. I mean, it's still upsetting.
I think we just know what to expect is the difference. And it really pushes further that you would convince a client not to do those things because you've personally lived through it. Like, what it's like to live in, a pile of construction dust and debris and all of that. And, what you were saying earlier about your kitchen renovation, it was supposed to be, just like really simple. And tying back to what I've been doing at my house is I teach and tell my clients that your house is a system of interrelated parts. And I think these two examples really bring that home, right? Is, a house isn't just, four walls or whatever. Those parts are all tied together. They work together as a system. Changing one means that you have to change a lot of other things. And it's complicated, and renovations are expensive and time consuming. And in the last year and a half, have also added complications of things that you can get, things that don't show up on time, things that you can't get any longer. So it's been a fun and interesting time to practice architecture and build.
That is definitely for sure. It has been an exercise in patience too, like having to change direction because something's not available or won't be available. Like right now, windows are out 22 weeks, I hear.
Yeah.
That's a long time. That's almost half a year.
It was always the stick about European triple pane windows. If you can get past Americans not being familiar with tilt and turn as a style of window, like, Europeans just don't even think twice about it because that's what they've had for the longest time. But so if you can get past the style of tilt and turns, which are actually fantastic in the way that they work.
They are.
So if you can kind of get past that, it was always, oh, well, it's a 8 to 10 week lead time. This is pre-pandemic. Now I can still get my European tilt and turn windows in 10 to 14 weeks, which is half the amount of time that the new American, the local American made windows that used to be able to get in 2 to 4 weeks are now, 16 to 18 weeks or 20 weeks, like you said. So
things change and evolve and we need to learn how to adapt, I guess. But back to your project. So what else are you planning to do?
I'm planning to do lots more things. So it started out, the bones of this house really are great. It's in a great location and it had a really great layout. Minus the fact that I didn't have open concept at the time, the layout was still had a great flow. You could walk around the fireplace block on both sides. So there was a nice flow between our spaces. And as an architect, nothing drives me more crazy than buildings that have no flow. They have weird spaces. They have awkward like doors and places that like you can't put a piece of furniture in a room because there's too many doors and windows and everything else. And so this house had great bones. So after looking at 52 houses, I told my husband, I can live in this one. And then I was like, we just need to make some, minor changes to make it our style and update the things that are maintenance things. And he has now determined that I would like to touch every square inch of the house, which is kind of true, but also just that's how renovations work. You just can't touch one thing and not touch something else. So, for what I do in my primary practice of having, all electric, low chemical, carbon storing buildings, I'm trying to pull into my current house. So we talked about having to replace the wood stove with something that's better for our indoor space, then replace the boiler system. Actually, the very first project that we did was put in a heat pump hot water tank, because making water off your boiler is the least efficient way to make hot water. It's a little bit crazy. Your oil boiler running all summer long to keep itself warm so that you can have water once a day when two people take showers just seemed crazy to me. And so the first thing we did was a heat pump hot water tank. And then now that we've done the heat pumps, we can take out the heating system, which will give my south facing roof slope back. But when we bought this house, they said the roof would need to be replaced probably in 5 years. We live on the saltwater, and so saltwater is really difficult on building materials. The roof is just kind of end of its usable life. I mean, honestly, I think it's at 30 some years anyway. So, I mean, it's kind of at the end of its product lifespan anyways, an asphalt shingle roof. So, the next things we will do likely will be roofing and solar panels, which will charge my electric car that I have. And so, then followed by, I'm waiting up here in Maine. There's a company called Timber HP that's putting together a wood fiber factory. They're going to do wood fiber bats, wood fiber blown in insulation, and wood fiber board insulation.
Oh.
So what I'd like to do is our siding also had a 5-year lifespan on it, because although most people think that vinyl siding is maintenance free, that is not really the cost, and it does have a lifespan, and saltwater is difficult on vinyl siding. So the vinyl siding needs to come off, and we have 2x4 walls with fiberglass insulation in them. So I am at least lucky that there's fiberglass insulation in my walls, because it could have been nothing. So there's that.
Could have been nothing. So it's interesting. I can't, if I had bought a house like a 1977 house, I think I'd feel more open to changing things about it without feeling like the nostalgic sort of feeling I have for older houses.
Well, older houses come with their own challenges, which are often harder to handle and to fix. I knew I wouldn't want it to be vinyl siding forever, so I certainly would not have picked a house that had new vinyl siding, right? Because then you want to, once you have it, it's already got its own carbon deficit, right? Like, you have this thing. It's your goal then to continue to maintain it, right? Our goal in renovating houses to make them more carbon storing and to make them better for the environment and all that is not to just rip out all the bad things that people put in beforehand, for sure. So once it's here, you want to use it until it's at the end of its usable life. Right. So we knew that this vinyl siding didn't have that much longer to go on it. What we will replace it with is still up for debate between my husband and I, but I think likely what we will replace it with is a natural shingle, which we will let weather, which is very common on the coast of Maine.
Right.
So something that withstands the saltwater weathering, has a very traditional New England look to it, and can be installed over rain screens and in different ways now. That will extend the longevity of that material itself as well. So what we'll do is we'll take off that vinyl siding, which I'm fairly certain is over wood siding that it's probably been rotting for the last 30 years because it doesn't breathe that well. So it gets wet behind it, and upwind coastal winds and water washing into it. That I think the likelihood is the old wood siding from the 70s probably is not in a good enough condition to keep. And so we'll do an air barrier to improve the air tightness of our house. Hopefully we will be able to skin it with a layer of continuous insulation and then put strapping and shingles up over top of it. So that's the end goal. I'd love to say that'll happen in the next 5 years. It's a bigger project, roofing and siding, and especially if you're adding insulation and strapping and everything else are just, you've got surface area, and so it's a bigger project. So hopefully it'll happen sooner than later, but it could be a longer term, just really as things start to fail. So
Right. And then it also, it affects the windows and doors too.
yes. And so you have to do additional trim, different trim. We actually still have 50% of our windows are still the original windows from the 70s that are wood. And so those windows are at failure. So those ones we would definitely improve to the best of our ability. So we'll probably put in triple pane tilt and turn windows at that time.
Mm.
Anybody who's ever listened to my podcast or listened to me talk knows that windows are the very last thing I want people to do. Because they don't really improve efficiency as far as saving you money. If you did a window renovation and it saved you money, it had more to do with how we install windows now and how we air seal them in the wall than it does with the actual window. So now, granted, if you can afford to do it, the triple pane windows add thermal comfort. So you feel less cold when you sit next to a window that has a third pane of glass, for sure. But as far as how much energy it saves you, not a lot. So in our new design principles, we spend a lot more time deciding how many windows we need, what they need to highlight, and where they go,
Yeah.
and get more wall area. But in a renovation, a lot of times people will just put windows back where they had windows before.
Do you have, let's say, top 3 tips for people who, when renovating their house, they want to improve the environmental friendliness of their house? What should they think of when they're improving their home?
I think it depends on whether you're doing an interior or exterior project. So if you're doing an interior renovation project, I would definitely encourage people to look at what the material content is. So what are the materials that you're bringing into your house? Because, VOCs, plastics, adhesives, a lot of that stuff can get trapped in our tighter homes. So as we improve the efficiency of our homes, we're oftentimes making them tighter. And so we have to be a little bit more careful about the things that we bring into and put into our houses. So if we start asking the questions and homeowners start asking those questions, we'll move the market forward where we won't have to ask those questions anymore because we'll just be getting things that are better as a rule of thumb. But like zero VOC paint is almost a standard now. It's not hard to get zero VOC paint. Do that. It's important. So if you're doing things on the inside of your house, ventilation and, what is in the materials that you're putting into the house is important. If you're doing an exterior project or looking for low-hanging fruit, we always say that air sealing is the best bang for your buck because it's usually pretty cheap. Caulking is something that you can do as a homeowner. You can have somebody do for you, but it's really important that you are not trapping moisture then inside of your house. So if you want to do an air sealing project and you want to improve the drafts and the leakiness of your house, make sure that you're not going to create another issue by trapping moisture inside or trapping fuel gases from a wood stove, a boiler, a furnace, a hot water tank. And so if you don't know what I'm talking about, then I highly recommend that you hire an energy auditor before you make any changes. That will be a small amount of money that will be a huge value to you. They can prioritize a list of what you should do, what you should check off. So I always say water management first. Definitely don't want any water. After you figured out water management, air sealing, caulking lots of places, whether it's light fixtures or electrical penetrations, things that pop up into your attic. And then if you're really thinking about it, if you want to stay warm in the snow, oftentimes we will wear a hat and boots. So start in the attic or the basement. So those are the two kind of first priority spaces. If you can control air infiltration and the energy heat loss from the bottom and the top, you're making a huge impact. You have a lot less loss through the middle of your building. So those are my tips or takeaways for people. But I think it's important to have a consultant who can help guide you so that you don't create an issue you didn't previously have.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Emily, tell me a little bit about your podcast, what it is, what it's about, how people might get the knowledge they need from you.
Sure. So my podcast is called E3 Energy and Efficiency with Emily. I started it originally because I used to write a lot of blog posts, but I don't think too many people have time to read long-winded posts anymore. And I'm a talker, if you didn't get that already from this podcast. And so it's very easy for me to just talk about ideas on the podcast. And so it's branched out to first, architecture. We talk about, what's good design? What are other architects doing? All of that stuff. We talk about energy efficiency. Like, how do we build a pretty good house? And if you don't know what pretty good house is, it's a funny saying, but go to prettygoodhouse.org to learn more about what's a pretty good house. This is how do we do a little bit better with what we're building? Like, we don't want to build and as code improves, we'll stop saying this, but until code gets as good as it gets, code is the worst house you can legally build. So pretty good houses, how to be better and do better at all of those things without having to do a certification program. So maybe you don't want to build a passive house and get it certified, but you want some of the knowledge on, how do I have better comfort? How do I have better air quality? How do I have lower VOC materials. And those things are kind of covered in Pretty Good House. And so we talk about efficiency on the podcast, and then we talk about female entrepreneurship. So where are my ladies out there? I want to really highlight and promote other women in architecture, construction, engineering, and trade-related fields, plumbing, electrical. Actually, I only know one female electrician, but really highlight out there, one, because we have a trade shortage. So we need everybody to be joining in the trades, no matter who you are. And two, because I think, and based on what I've talked to of a lot of other women, is we think we have to be perfect, so we don't jump into it right away. Everybody has to learn, no matter who you are. And so it's perfectly fine to ask questions. You don't have to be perfect at it at the beginning, and to just connect other women with other women in the field so they can share their stories, so they can be mentors, so they can say, it's not, there's no barrier to entry for women in the trades. We don't lift heavy things on our own anymore, right? Like, we come up with systems. It's a skill that a lot of women have, and we just don't realize, or it isn't tied. Unfortunately, I think in our schools, we don't necessarily tie skills that we're good at. Like, maybe you're good at math, can translate into the trade field. Maybe you're good at project management, translates into the trade field. Maybe you're good at art, translates into architecture and design build. There's so many roles to fulfill that we need to bring back excitement and enjoyment of the trade field. And so my podcast is to highlight other female entrepreneurs who are out there doing it, working for other businesses, and just being great at what they're doing. So I really like to bring them on, highlight them, put them out there, and show other people that, there's no reason why you can't. So that's what my podcast is about. You can listen to it on my website. You can listen to it on iTunes, Stitcher, and Spotify as well. So
that's awesome, Emily. And what else? Do you have other social links like Instagram? Do you spend a lot of time on Instagram or Facebook?
I do. Instagram's probably my primary platform. There is a great building science community on Instagram. So if you're not on the Instagram community, you should join in there. There is also, technically, I push some information to Facebook, but LinkedIn is another place where I connect with other professionals, where you share other trade stories. Lots of people sharing articles and research that they've done. That's really valuable. And on Thursday nights, starting again full-time in September, we do a live Zoom show for the BS and Beer show. So BS standing for Building Science. And so that is a great place where we bring on other experts in the field, or just lay people, homeowners. We do a book club, book review. We're just starting to share the message of building science, to give it a good rap and to let people know that it's a very sharing community. People who are free with their knowledge, who want to share, who want to see everybody succeed. And so all of our previous episodes are up on the BS and Beer Show YouTube channel, but you can join live on Thursday nights. And there's a chat box, which is often very lively. We try to take all of our people who join in, we try to take audience questions to ask the people who are on screen. But there's generally a very lively chat, which has helped to foster other people in the rest of the country to know that there are people like you who are also interested in similar things in your area. And so it was started because our local BS and Beer chapter couldn't meet in person during the pandemic. So we jumped on a Zoom just to make sure that everybody was okay. How were they surviving? Did they need help? Word got out to some people who know us, who are in other parts of the country, who then wanted to join, and the BS and Beer Show was born.
That's so great. That's so great.
Evolved into bigger things, but we're really hoping to encourage it to grow other local chapters so that as people are able to get back together in person again, they've maybe connected with people in their area who are interested in similar things, but that the online show is also a great resource for people who want to learn more about heat pumps or have a client that doesn't know anything about induction ranges, and they can go watch an episode on induction ranges or kitchen ventilation. So it's a great resource to send other professionals or other clients to homeowners who are thinking about building to get more information on the crazy things that we talk about that we forget you don't know because it's been so long that since we learned something about it. So it's a great way to kind of add additional information on what we're doing and why we're doing it. So there's the BS and Beer Show as well on Thursday nights. So
how do you find that? Or do you have to get an invitation to the Zoom?
There's a website called the bsandbeershow.com. It'll ask you to register the very first time that you go on there, and then it will send you a weekly reminder every Thursday that there's a show coming up. That is actually just through the Zoom platform. If you want to know what the shows are that are coming up, you can join our mailing list on the bsandbeershow.com, and that will tell you what the next upcoming show is, who the guests might be, what we're going to talk about. We also follow that up with a blog post on Green Building Advisor, where we encourage people, if they didn't get their questions asked, to go over and continue the discussion on Green Building Advisor. And then all of the old episodes are up on YouTube so that you can watch or rewatch or relearn. Some of them, even though I've been doing this a long time, we get some great people on who are experts in their field that I'm like, I'm going to have to watch that again. So there are in-depth episodes, and there are lighthearted, fun, scary building failures that we did on Halloween, where we dressed up and talked about scary building failures. So it's a good time had by all.
Well, I've heard good things about it. I haven't actually watched it yet, so I guess I will. I was kind of unclear exactly what it was, so now I'll check that out for sure. So
clearly our marketing message needs to extend further. We would really love to have more homeowners who are interested in building to come on, ask questions, tell us what they don't know, right? So we can structure shows about what you might want to know. And so it's a fun time had by all, usually.
Well, thank you, Emily. It's just really been fun to talk to you, and I appreciate your time.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you having me on.
Anytime. Thanks again, Emily, for sharing your plans and your knowledge with us. And thank you for listening to this episode. If you have ideas for other episodes, things you'd like to see, you can contact me through Instagram or Facebook, where I am Talking Home Renovations. On TikTok, I'm the House Maven. Twitter, well, don't write to me on Twitter because I don't really check that very much, but on that I am Talking Home Reno. Clubhouse, I'm the House Maven, or my own name. And of course, email will definitely get to me, and that is thehousemaven@talkinghomerenovations.com. So I've been hearing lately from listeners, and it makes my day. So if you're enjoying the show, if you have any comments, if you have any suggestions, please get in touch. I love it. So Another thing you could do, you could go to wherever you get your podcast and you could leave a review and a rating. And most importantly, you could subscribe. You could also get my newsletter, which there is a link in the show notes as to how you can sign up to get the episode enhancements mailed directly to your inbox every Wednesday morning. And then you don't miss an episode and you get some of the backstory and photos. And anyway, you can also access those on my website, talkinghomerenovations.com. We're also building up our transcript library, and I have a voice, like a speak box, what is it called? Speak pipe thing on there too, where you can leave me an audio message that could be included in an episode. And I can't even believe nobody's used that yet. I just thought I would be inundated with recordings, and yet I am not. So check that out. If you have any story about specifically, I'm trying to get people to tell me stories about weird things they found while they were renovating their homes. I am going to be having a class on getting started on your home renovation. That's going to be August 23rd. I'm going to be having these about every 8 weeks or so. This one's August 23rd, followed by the kickoff of the mastermind group. That's starting August 31st. You can find more information about both these classes or both these events or whatever you want to call them on my website. And this third season, I have joined Gable Media. So I'm pretty excited about that. It's the most engaged AEC multimedia network on the planet. You can check out the podcast and the video channels that are part of that network at gablemedia.com, and that's GABLMEDIA.com. This podcast has been a production of Demios Architects, where we believe architects are for everyone. Thanks so much for listening. See you next time. Until then, take care.